Welcome back to the final part of the programme, and in honour of the planet's most important motorcycle expo, we're going to head back to Milan to take a look at the class of bikes that is probably closest to the hearts of South African bikers: adventure bikes. We've already recently covered the debut of BMW's new GS models, the 1300 and 900, but just before the opening of this year's expo we also had new model reveals from several other manufacturers, and arguably the three most interesting of those come from homegrown Italian talent. Since we have not got much time to get through this triple crown of Italy's more exclusive end of the adventure bike market, I'll be trying to do something that doesn't come naturally to me, which is to cut the waffling and be concise and to the point. Yeah, not very likely, but let's give it a go anyway. First up is what's left of MV Agusta's intended two-pronged assault on the adventure class. You might remember that at last year's EICMA, MV showed off its Lucky Explorer stand and the 5.5 and 9.5 that it intended releasing, well, about now. The 9.5 was to be powered by an enlarged, updated version of the middleweight 800cc triple-cylinder engine, while the 5.5 was basically copying what Benelli had done with the TRK 502, Italy's best-selling big bike that was essentially a model from Chinese manufacturer QJ with a fancy Italian brand name. A lot has happened at MV Agusta since then, most notably Stefan Pira's mobility group, the owners of KTM, buying a significant share in MV. That significance has recently grown even more, so that KTM will shortly assume a controlling interest in the Italian manufacturer. One of the first things they've done is to kill the 5.5 project, thankfully. It just didn't sit right with me having the storied and premium brand of MV Agusta passing off well, let's face it, a cheap Chinese adventure bike as something linked meaningfully to the Varese outfit. The 9.5 project also appears to have been scaled back because now only 500 of the LXP Orioli will be made. Orioli, also known as Eddie to his mates, was a top desert racer on the original Lucky Explorer race bikes of the 1990s. I'm sure this bike was meant to be a more mass-produced model originally, and I'm sure that KTM and Husqvarna already having brilliant adventure bikes has nothing at all to do with the now very limited nature of this foray into the world of adventure. I think this may mark a pretty short-lived presence in the adventure segment for MV, which might actually make this a genuine collector's bike. And in future, expect to see them stick to very expensive, limited edition performance road bikes with plenty of Italian design flair, style, and with frequent references to the firm's racing heritage, something that the current brands in Mr. Pira's portfolio are missing. Okay, let's move on from Lake Varese and head not too far east to Lake Como and the small town of Mandello del Lario, the home of Moto Guzzi. Last year at EICMA they showed off their new engine in the all-new V100 Mandello, and very well received it was too. A smart looking bike that I thought was perhaps just a bit too conservative in its design, though in retrospect, given the age and outlook on life of its average customer, it was probably the ideal model with which to mark an effort to breathe some new life into the brand. A year later and we now have the next model using the same basic platform, this time in the shape of an adventure bike. The Stelvio is, to my jaded eyes at least, an equally conservative design, but ultimately a more handsome, classy looking machine than the V100. Its svelte form a stark contrast to many of the bulging brawlers of the current crop of large capacity adventure bikes. This is no KTM or BMW rivaling beast for the hardcore off-road junkie, and is more of a road-biased adventure tourer, hence no change to the name since there was the last model carrying the designation of Stelvio in the Guzzi range. Stelvio is of course a world-famous tarred mountain pass in Italy, and to reinforce the gentle nature of this bike's intended adventuring, there is a 19-inch front rim and Piaggio's 4D radar technology to provide adaptive cruise control, blind spot detection and collision avoidance features. As in the Mandello, the 1042cc V-twin engine is good for 115 horsepower and 105 newton meters, which is more than its Japanese competitors, but a long way behind its borderline bonkers European counterparts. The third Italian adventure bike I promised you is the Moto Morini 1200 X-Cape, a model that seems to signify that the brand has finally completed its recovery from near bankrupt obscurity. Like many famous European names, it can thank its revival to collaboration with and investment from a big Chinese manufacturer. Though this new 1200 adventure model features an engine that has been designed and manufactured in Italy. It's a big V-twin that even in Euro 5 trim is apparently good for 125 horsepower, and it comes with a suite of electronics controlled by a 6-axis IMU that means they're advanced enough to measure up to the other big players in the class. Along with 4 riding modes, you get a 2-way quick shifter, cruise control, blind spot radar sensor, and a very generous TFT screen of 7 inches through which you can control everything from the navigation to the adjustable traction control. Like Moto Guzzi Stelvio, there is a 19-inch front rim, an indication that this X-Cape is possibly not meant to be competition for the most hardcore of the big adventure bikes, but it will surely be capable enough to hold its own against the vast majority of road-biased adventure tourers. And with that, our time is up. Please join us again next week when Don will be riding Suzuki's V-Strom 800, and I'll hopefully be back on a bike for the first time in 6 months. See you then.